Boston Brix. It isn't the name of the American Boston City or any other city, but it's the name of one of the most dangerous secret intelligence operations in the world. Simply, it's one of the methods of physical liquidation and carrying out assassination operations in a clean manner that leaves no trace behind. This term appeared in the 1980s, and was used several times by Western intelligence services, including British intelligence. To apply this method, there must be a modern car equipped with a lot of electronics, and it must be of an expensive brand, such as the Mercedes that Princess Diana was getting in. In the electronic system of these cars, an electronic chip with transmit and receive features is used, which means that it sends and receives wireless signals at the same time. And if wireless signals are sent to this car by a certain external device, the electronic device that controls its movement quickly malfunctions, and then the car completely breaks down. Also, a stroboscope device is used to make bright flashes of light, which will affect the driver's vision of the target car. According to the details and circumstances of the implementation of each operation, in the end all of this must lead to the target car being exposed to an accident, killing the targeted person inside, and appearing as just a fatal accident and not a human conspiracy to liquidate a specific person. Surprisingly, the perpetrators of these operations aren't from the intelligence services, of course, because the law after the end of World War II became prohibiting intelligence from carrying out these actions, whether for American, British or Russian intelligence. Just they are agents who carry out these operations for the benefit of those intelligence services, under their supervision, and with the full support of them. They may be just mercenaries, or men from the mafia or from bodies specialized in carrying out liquidation operations, and then with regard to the process of liquidating Princess Diana and her fiancé Dodi al-Fayed, and based on information from Russian intelligence, it should be referred in this regard to an organization called UKN, and another called Increment. They are two of the organizations specialized in carrying out liquidations of this kind, and these organizations constantly change their names for security purposes. And according to what the economist John Perkins revealed from the secrets of these secret operations, the people who carry out the liquidations are called the jackals in America, and they liquidate the undesirable political figures. The names differ according to the devices that are dealt with, and for security purposes, these names are changed and don't remain for long. In fact, the names change, but the content remains unchanged. Only the scenarios and the importance of the character being eliminated differ. So, the murder of Princess Diana and her fiancé Dodi al-Fayed is one of the same series of murders. Russian journalist Mr. Gennady Sokolov was able to obtain basic information about the circumstances of the accident that happened to Princess Diana, from the people he deals with in the Russian intelligence. Mr. Gennady Sokolov is an international journalist and researcher in the history of the intelligence. He didn't do it for the billionaire Mohammed al-Fayed's £20 million bounty, but because he sympathized with Princess Diana, and he still sympathizes with her today. On the contrary, he hates the House of Windsor, and his distaste for them increased after he discovered their black history. So, his motive to research and investigate this unfortunate incident was that it was very suspicious. At the time, the concerned authorities were working to make the general public feel that the accident was an act of God and not a plan for liquidation. Mr. Gennady and others who interested in searching for the truth know the methods of the parties that carry out these plans and conspiracies and immediately work to direct the public opinion towards the reality of what is happening when they want to. So, the surveillance cameras in the Alma tunnel where the accident occurred, for an unknown reason, were off that particular night. Also, their work to direct public opinion towards a false result is represented in the number of forged analysis that they published about the driver Henry Paul, which revealed the presence of a percentage of charcoal in his blood and that the percentage of alcohol in his blood is about 1.078 liters. In fact, Mr. Jean-Claude Mullez, the first detective inspector that arrived at the scene and gathered preliminary information, later admitted that he had made a mistake in the blood samples, and that those samples received in the investigation related to a person who committed suicide, where he died in a garage asphyxiated by coal gas. This explains the presence of the percentage of charcoal that they rumored it was in Henry Paul's blood. So, their rumor that said the driver was drunk was debunked. The driver's vision was obscured by the flashes of the stroboscope, where any photographers in the accident of Princess Diana's death could make these flashes, because it was easy to install this device in a camera flash. All of the witnesses confirmed that they saw unusual flashes in the tunnel, not camera flashes. Also, of the 15 photographers accompanying the car, only the identity of 11 of them was verified, which means that the other 4 were likely intelligence agents who often lurk in the ranks of photographers who track royal figures. Also, it is certain that one of the photographers was an intrusive agent, and that he was the same person who blinded the driver with the stroboscope, and was able to disable the functions of the car, which is known as the Boston Brix operation known to the British Private Security Services. All 5 Mercedes cars designated for transportation for guests of the Ritz Hotel, where Princess Diana stayed in Paris, were subjected to a technical inspection a few days before the accident, so, if the private security services want to put something in it, there is no better chance than this golden opportunity. It should be noted here that there was a receipt for Dodi al-Fayed's purchase of an engagement ring for Princess Diana for a sum of £120,000. But this documented evidence wasn't made public and wasn't included in the investigation documents. Also, 2 pregnancy certificates for Princess Diana issued by a hospital weren't included in the investigation documents, because as a result of forensic analysis on a sample of Princess Diana's blood that they obtained from the car carpets after the accident, Princess Diana was never pregnant. So, it confirms with the lie of her pregnancy from her fiancé Dodi al-Fayed, and the forgery of the 2 aforementioned testimonies. Despite all that, the investigation immediately began to study one viewpoint, that it was just an ordinary accident. So, at that time, Judge Hervé Stephan didn't even consider the idea of the planned murder. Despite the contradictions of evidence too, the investigation files of the accident didn't include a representative simulation of the accident in order to work on an objective investigation that arrives at the truth of what actually happened, and to make everything clear to the public. They determined initially the result of this investigation, and worked to direct everyone towards this result, rather than initially considering all possible possibilities, where the documents are collected, and then other documents are added to them according to all possible viewpoints, as happens in any serious investigations, especially with a public opinion case of this high level. But all the information that could have indicated that it was a premeditated murder was never considered. They never took into account the things raised about the stroboscope flashes and the testimony of eyewitnesses about it, including the testimony of the paparazzi that tracked Princess Diana's car and initially talked about it, but the investigation never took their testimony into account. Also, some of the photographers who took photographs in the first moments of the accident fled Paris, but this didn't save them. One of them was found burnt in his car later, and another died on the operating table without an understandable reason during a minor knee surgery. As for the accident itself, it isn't yet clear why did the ambulance arrive at an hour and a half after the accident to take the injured Princess Diana to the hospital. Although the nearest hospital is only 6 minutes away from the tunnel and the injuries of Princess Diana weren't as serious as those of her guard Mr. Trevor Rees-Jones, who survived because he was quickly taken to the hospital. She could have survived if they had helped her in time, but at that time in Paris, they said that the ambulance system in France works to immediately provide the necessary assistance to the injured at the scene of the accident, and then take him to the hospital. But this absolutely doesn't justify their lateness of an hour and a half even though they were supposed to arrive in 6 minutes at the most, and doesn't justify their different behavior towards the guard who they immediately took him to the hospital, unlike what they did with Princess Diana, although her injuries were the mildest. So, they could very well have been saved her, if they really wanted to. Immediately after Diana's death, the British government asked the French government to embalm her body while she was still in France. They wanted to remove all traces of truth, before sending her body to Britain. This was very strange and suspicious, especially since after the embalming of her body was completed, it would be useless for forensic doctors to perform an autopsy on it. They already prepared false stories about the accident to work to direct the public towards, and they also created good reasons for. It was clear that there was complicity among the ambulance doctors as a result of their behavior. The investigation there was well done, so that everything appears according to the official story as just an accident that was an act of God. Subsequently, the concerned authorities did their duty as it should about the accident. They didn't want anyone to know that the truth was otherwise, as it was in fact an operation to liquidate Princess Diana and her fiancé Dodi al-Fayed. It is no coincidence that Diana wrote her famous letter to her butler Paul Burrell, where she said that her assassination was being prepared. Paul Burrell didn't publish that letter until more than 6 years after the accident, because Queen Elizabeth II, who he was working for her before his working for Diana, asked him not to reveal the content of this letter, as he said. But then he didn't care anymore, so he published it and started talking about everything, including what Queen Elizabeth had ordered him to never disclose the letter. While the assassination of Princess Diana was being prepared, Russian intelligence agents were closely watching the scene, as some of them worked in particular in France and others in England. On the day of the incident, August 31, 1997 in Paris, these agents tracked the three very important men of the British intelligence. At first they tracked only two people, Sir Richard Dearlove and Mr. Richard Spearman, who had great experience in the intelligence work in France and were high-ranking of the British intelligence officials at the time. As for the third, we will talk about him later. They confirmed that the two men had come to Paris a day or two before the accident in the Alma tunnel, to supervise the operation of the assassination of Diana, and then they left Paris after the accident. The Russian intelligence agents tracked them because the intelligence men should track the movements of senior intelligence persons, not because they had information about the assassination of Princess Diana. To document the information about this secret visit by British intelligence officials to Paris, in the summer of 1997, was published after Mr. Gennady Sokolov by the Englishman Mr. Richard Tomlinson, who came out of prison and came to Russia, and he had worked for British intelligence. Then in the autumn of 1998, the Russian Military Intelligence Service specially established a publishing house, to publish his book containing this information, in both Russian and English, for distribution abroad as well. Just 2 years after the accident, Richard Dearlove became director of British intelligence. Richard Spearman was the director of the MI6 Chief's Office, Sir David Spedding. The third was Nicholas Lingman, who was one of the most prominent British intelligence agents in Uruguay, America, and France. All of them worked at different times in France and were able to form intelligence relations, spread a network of agents, establish necessary contacts, and so on. But most of all, these Britons came to Paris officially without formal coordination with their French peers, and this is contrary to the intelligence cooperation agreements between the two countries. But later, it turned out that the French themselves asked them to come secretly, which means that there was secret coordination between British and French intelligence to carry out the liquidation operation. Consequently, the French security services have cooperated with the British security services regarding the liquidation of Princess Diana in Paris. Of course, Mr. Gennady Sokolov didn't receive documents from his sources of information within the French security services to find out the truth of the French role in that operation, but with political shrewdness, he told them that he was conducting an investigation about what happened, and so he only wanted to verify the validity of what he had concluded, which is the conclusion that what happened isn't just a road accident, but it was an orchestrated assassination. So, they orally told him, "You are right." They told him that they have reliable information that the accident was a conspiracy wasn't carried out by agents of British intelligence, but it was carried out under their supervision and at their request, and so it was most likely carried out by agents of one of the Western private military organizations. This conspiracy had certain reasons, including reasons related to racism towards Arabs and Muslims. Among the evidence for this is that racist tendencies were and still exist in the House of Windsor. Princess Margaret, the sister of Queen Elizabeth II, was hostile to Semitism. For the knowledge, the term of Semitism includes both Arabs and Jews, because they are cousins and they are all sons of Shem, the son of Noah. Also, Prince Philip was a racist if we look at some of that he said. It seems that hostility to Arabs and Islam played a decisive role in this tragedy, because Princess Diana was preparing to marry an Arab Muslim man, Mr. Dodi al-Fayed. Princess Diana has immense popularity and unlimited sympathy worldwide, so that, it is easy to imagine what the consequences of this marriage would have if it had taken place, especially if it became in concurring with Princess Diana's announcement of her conversion to embrace Islam. Also, if she had a child from this marriage, Prince William and Prince Harry, her two oldest sons and the two future kings, would become half-brothers of an Arab Muslim brother. In addition to that, there are many evidences that Princess Diana was very sympathetic with Islam as a religion. Sometimes, she appeared wearing a hijab, and it is said she had intended to embrace Islam. Then, the mother of the new British king could become Muslim and married to an Arab Muslim man. So, the British royal house could never allow this, it's impossible. Especially in the 1990s, the reputation of the British royal regime fell, and the ghost of disintegration and collapse appeared, because Wales and Scotland have begun to demand their rights. Also, the Irish have carried out terrorist acts during the 1980s and the 1990s. It was a huge problem for the British royal regime, which its reputation increasingly fell, when many books and films have been published to defame the morals of members of the British royal family, and articles appeared under the title of The Decadence of the House of Windsor. So that, if Princess Diana married a Muslim man, and gave birth to a Muslim child, this would have been a disaster from the perspective of national security for the United Kingdom, and then the work to prevent this should be done by the British intelligence and offices of counterintelligence. There is another reason: Princess Diana wasn't careful in her sayings, so if she had spoken like that 200 years ago nearly, they would have cut off her head immediately. For example, she once said in a press interview that Prince Charles can't adapt to becoming a king. It is said that the Queen went crazy when she learned of this saying, especially she has known the extent of Diana's popularity with the British people and the whole world. According to Mr. Gennady Sokolov, Diana wanted to get revenge on the royal court because they insulted and humiliated her greatly. They humiliated her because of their deceit that the royal family committed to, not just Prince Charles, and Charles's constant infidelities that Diana was aware of. The retinue of the royal court sympathized with her, because she was completely different from all of the members of the royal family. For example, no one understood why she was humble with the servants, and why she was speaking to them like an ordinary and simple woman. Also, she insisted that her 2 sons attend a regular school. She was normal, albeit an aristocratic princess. She was born into the noble Spencer family, which is most aristocratic than the House of Windsor. It's a very noble British family. However, Diana grew up in very ordinary circumstances. When she was studying, she rented a very simple apartment, devoid of any pomp, especially the pomp that had always characterized the British royal family. So, the public sympathized with her much more than they sympathized with Prince Charles and the royal family. Mr. Gennady Sokolov collected information about the assassination of Diana and her fiancé Dodi al-Fayed and decided to send it to Dodi al-Fayed's father, the billionaire Mohammed al-Fayed, because Mr. Mohammed al-Fayed had decided at that time to make a private investigation about the accident. This information could have helped Mr. Mohammed al-Fayed in this private investigation, especially he wouldn't have found documented evidence of a conspiracy if he followed the path of the official investigation. Although Mr. Mohammed al-Fayed was a billionaire, he was unable to obtain British citizenship. So that, in this conflict, the victory over all these prominent, large and most experienced security agencies, and this very powerful royal regime, is a hopeless thing. Mr. Mohammed al-Fayed understood this well, but he wanted to change the public opinion, talk about his suspicions, and make it clear to everyone that this accident wasn't ordinary, but a very carefully planned conspiracy. Surprisingly enough, al-Fayed never responded to Mr. Gennady Sokolov when he sent him the documents. In 2012, 15 years after the death of Princess Diana, the newspaper Komsomolskaya Pravda published a large article written by Russian journalist Gennady Sokolov about this tragedy. Just at the time, al-Fayed called him. Mr. Gennady Sokolov was communicated, on al-Fayed's behalf, by Mr. John McNamara, who is al-Fayed's entrusted agent, a retired British detective, and an intelligence expert. Then, it turned out that they never had received the documents sent by Mr. Gennady, although the person who sent the documents told Mr. Gennady that he had handed over the package to al-Fayed's secretary. So, Mr. Mohammed al-Fayed made a private investigation to know what happened to the documents and why they hadn't reached him for so long, and then, it turned out that there was an intelligence agent. They discovered him after a long time, where he was among al-Fayed's employees. Among those around Mr. Mohammed al-Fayed, there were spies who were working for British intelligence to provide it with information about him. Also, British intelligence redoubled its efforts, especially after the tragedy of 1997, because al-Fayed began to openly confront the Windsor royal family. Then they finally found the documents, but 15 years after the accident. So, it was too late. The information hasn't been lost, but unfortunately its usefulness has been lost. As it said, an egg today is better than a hen tomorrow. Although Mr. Mohammed al-Fayed and Mr. John McNamara were convinced the accident was murder, they weren't never able to convince the world of that, because they must have compelling and indisputable physical evidence to re-examine the case in court. Because of all that, al-Fayed asked Mr. Gennady to pay any money to his friends of Russian intelligence in exchange for this evidence, and told him that it's okay if they changed their voices and didn't reveal their faces during the recording. Although al-Fayed asked Mr. Gennady to record their testimonies as videos to send them to him and he actually recorded them, he was never able to send, because one of the authorities that Gennady couldn't disclose has imposed a ban on these recordings. Mr. Gennady Sokolov says that the Russian intelligence has copies of 1,051 documents that belong to the FBI and the CIA. And it's shared documents about Princess Diana being monitored and her calls being listened to, by a listening device installed in telephone sets. Mr. Gennady believes that these documents contain exactly the motive behind the liquidation of Princess Diana, because in some of her recorded interviews she expressed her desire to take revenge on the British royal palace and wanted to talk about the truth of what was happening within the royal family. But it isn't the time to declassify these documents and publish them to the public, so that everyone knows the truth about what happened through the documents and files.
If you like this video, don't forget to press like and subscribe, then press the bell icon to get you all new videos.